Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Aladina binti Muhammad Rizal from Group MSc Y1 of OG. My student ID is 2019-436038. So today I will be the first presenter. Okay, so for today's presentation will consist of introduction, issue, solution, and conclusion. Firstly, I'm going to give a brief explanation for the introduction. Before I proceed and begin the description, I would like to ask you, have you ever wondered why do we need to get our items from another countries since Malaysia can also produce their own goods? It is quite interesting topic, right? And this topic is very important for us to know. So, what is trade? Well, trade or trading refers to the transaction or the exchange of ownership of goods and services. Under trade, we have international trade and domestic trade. International trade is the exchange of goods and services between the people of two countries, while domestic trade is the transactions made domestically among the domestic traders in a country only. Next is export and import, which is the most important key in this topic. So export is selling the product to the global market. The top export partners of Malaysia are China, Singapore, USA, Japan, and Hong Kong. The main export products from Malaysia are electronic product, petroleum, palm oil, and many more. For import, it is defined as buying the product from global market. As you know, Malaysia have a lot of foreign trading partners such as Japan, China, New Zealand, and other developed countries. In order for us to know whether it is international or domestic trade, let us look at this table. So how can we differentiate the international trade and domestic trade? The difference between them is based on the size of market and volume of transactions, greater specialization in countries which involve in international trade, involve the use of different units of currency. Different nations produce varieties of goods as world production. Large competition between nations may lead to a better quality of goods, higher cost transportation, which involve long distance journey, and lastly is subject to government policy and controls. So since our current issue is more related to international trade, let me elaborate more about the pros and cons of international trade. For the pros, which is the advantage, international trade will first increase the world output because a country will get benefits from free trade if specialization is possible in area which it has absolute advantage and comparative advantage. For the second one, there are also varieties of goods and services, and also it will have increase in efficiency. Number 4 will give higher income and economic growth. For example, in April 2021, Malaysia's total trade recorded the strongest growth ever since 1998 by 43.2%, which is RM 190.8 billion. Okay, number 5, a country will be able to earn foreign exchange from exported goods. And lastly, it will give benefits to political, economy, social, and technology links. So just now, I have explained about the pros, which is the advantage. If there is an advantage, there also must be a disadvantage. Okay, for the cons, there will be a depletion of country's reserve, which is a continuous export of raw materials from country. For example, in Malaysia, we export raw materials such as palm oil, petroleum products, manufacture of metal that may drain the country's reserve. Next, the economics and political dependence, which a nation may have to depend on other countries for goods and services that makes the country vulnerable to external force. Lastly, is transportation costs that will be non-profitable for some countries if the costs are too high. For the next one, we're gonna move to protectionism. So basically, what is protectionism? Well, it can be defined as barriers or restrictions that are imposed by a country on the free flow of goods and services in order to protect its domestic industries. There are 5 protectionism tools that we can use to protect its domestic industries. Firstly is tariff, which is a tax are imposed on imports. It is to protect local industries and will make the price of this good becomes more expensive. And this will also lead to a decrease in the consumption of imported goods by households. Next, we have a quota, which is a restriction of imported goods. When the government limits the import of certain goods, it will put pressure on the price of goods, resulting in a price increase. And then we have subsidies on export. It is when local producers receive subsidies from government to produce goods and services for export to another countries. Next, we have exchange controls that occurs when the government wants to restrict the supply of foreign currencies. Lastly, we have embargo, which is a direct control by government of country to prohibit certain goods and services entering the country. There are a few examples of items that are prohibited for shipping to Malaysia, such as counterfeit money, poisonous chemicals, knife and daggers, and many more. COVID-19 pandemic will remain as the biggest threat to economic recovery in Malaysia. Malaysia must make use of its domestic advantage to find opportunities for their own economic growth. So, what are the reasons for protectionism? So, we have 5 reasons for protectionism. Firstly, it will reduce the problem of deficit imbalance of payments. It means that the import will be more than the export. For example, by using tariff and quotas, the imported goods will cost more and demand for imports will fall in relation to exports. Next is increase in government revenue by using some protectionism tools such as tariff and tax. In 2021, government's revenue is expected to increase by 4.2% to RM 236.9 billion or 15.1% of GDP. The increased revenue is mostly due to improved tax revenue collection, which is expected to rise by 13.8% to RM 174.4 billion. Third, we have is to protect infant industries. Why? They need to be protected during first few years of their operation since they are new industries in the country. Usually, they are lack of experience and size to compete against the competitors abroad. Is to prevent dumping, which is a situation where goods sold abroad at lower price compared to the origin market. This occurs when producers abroad are given export subsidies and may also exist when there is an excess in supply in the production of goods and services. Lastly is diversify in economy. It is to prevent the country from depending on one sector only. So with the implementation of some restrictions, the local producers will have to diversify their goods and creating a wide range of goods rather than focusing on production certain goods only.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aisha Fika binti Aminuddin with my matrix number A20194125 and 98. And I would like to present about the first issue. According to DOSM, which is Department of Statistics Malaysia, in April of 2021, Malaysia's total trade were increasing by 43.2% with 190.8 billion compared to April 2020. This situation occurs whenever those countries affected by COVID-19 are healed. The government has allowed all sectors of economy to run as usual, especially manufacturing sectors. Apart from that, Malaysia's export increased by 63% year-on-year to 105.6 billion in April 2021. Malaysia's imports surged 24.4% to RM 85.1 billion in April 2021. Whenever total export is exceeding total import, then it will be an implemented trade surplus. A trade surplus means an economic indicator of a favorable trade balance in which a country export outnumber its imports. Next slide, it can be seen at the statistic given, the total export is larger than total import. Having a strong trade surplus does not always imply rapid economic expansion. It is because this can cause depletions in countries' reserve. The continuous Malaysia's trade export of raw materials from the country such as oil, iron and steel may deplete a country's reserve of the deposit in the long run. If this happens, it will affect the growth of the country in the long run. The impact of dependence on export of natural resources, especially when it comes to minerals, negatively affect the degree of inequality and poverty in a particular society. Exceptions are a country that become dependent on natural resources after they already built institutions, the tax system and other sectors of the economy, or individual countries that have succeeded or are struggling to succeed in the development of other sectors of an economy. And a wealth of natural resources is enough to provide a high level of social and health security and protection and low levels of corruption perception of a public sector. However, these achievements are still accompanied by very low degree political freedom. Therefore, it shows that in some countries, the redistributions of income from the export of natural resources does not necessarily lead to a greater degree of democracy in a society. For the next part, I will pass to Nur Sabrina.
Thank you, Aim, for your good explanation about the Malaysia's goods trading issue. Hi, my name is Nur Sabrina binti Narazmi and I'm from MAC 1104G. My matrix numbers is 2019238714. Now, I'd like to discuss the topic at hand, which is Malaysia's trade in services deficit that is expected to increase in 2020. A trade deficit occurs when the cost of a country imports exceed the cost of its exports. It is also known as a negative balance of trade, and it is one way of measuring international trade. Back on the previous issue, Malaysia's total trade in export and import goods such as rubber products, electrical and electronic products, as well as palm oil and palm oil-based agriculture product rose up to 43.2%, reaching 190.8 billion compared with the last year. In comparison on to Malaysia's trade in services, this shows a significant increase in products trade. As we can see the statistic here, in 2020, Malaysia exports of services recorded 92.6 billion compared to 170.2 billion in the preceding year, resulting from a disruption in the key services components, namely travel and transport. Simultaneously, imports of services decreased up to 140.1 billion as against 181.1 billion in 2019. Travel, the mainstay of Malaysia's services trade, all this one has faced a challenging situation which led to the highest deficit in services in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A significant decrease, 83.4% compared to the preceding year following the border closure and travel restriction imposed by the countries around the world. Trade deficit, even in trade services, can create substantial problem in long run. It is because it can facilitate a sort of economic colonization. If Malaysia continually runs trade deficit, citizens of other countries acquire funds to buy up all capital in the nation. That can mean making a new investment that increases productivity and creates jobs. However, it may also involve merely buying up existing business, natural resource and any other asset. If this buying continues happen, foreign investors will eventually own nearly everything in the country. Trade deficits are generally much more dangerous with fixed exchange rates. Under a fixed exchange rate regime, devaluation of the currency is impossible. Trade deficits are more likely to continue and unemployment may increase significantly. For example, low-cost carrier Air Asia Berhad terminate the services of over 300 cabin crew from 1,900 crew members in a bid to downsize its operation. As the imports of the country are higher than the exports of the country, there is a reduction in domestic production. Lesser domestic production leads to a situation of unemployment. This demonstrates a variety of unfavorable consequences when a trade deficit in services occurs, even if trade in goods increasing or surplus.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nur Edina Sofia binti Mujibuddin and I'm from MSc 1104G. My student ID is 2019-425744. Today I'm going to talk about the solution to the issues. The solution to the first issue's problem is to limit or restrict trading activity in international trade, despite the fact that international trade helps in increasing a country's interchange of goods and services. The government can use protectionism as a way to limit the activity in international trade. Critics argue that over long term, protectionism often hurts the people by slowing economic growth and increasing price inflation and making free trade a better alternative. But The proponents of protectionism argue that the policies can help to create domestic jobs, increase gross domestic product, and make a domestic economy more competitive globally. Industry subsidies are one type of protectionism tool that can be used. The government should subsidize local producers in order to expand or improve their product while using fewer raw materials. The reason for using this method is to achieve the national goal of diversifying the economy by exporting other products rather than relying solely on raw materials. For example, instead of using natural rubber to make a rubber gloves, synthetic rubber can be used also. Natural and synthetic rubber both have high tear resistance, low temperature flexibility, and tensile strength. Synthetic rubbers can have superior heat resistance, lower temperature resistance, and improved heat aging. Another factor to consider when deciding between natural and synthetic rubber is that natural rubber contains natural proteins that, when in contact with human skin for an extended period of time, can cause allergic reactions. It shows that using synthetic rubber is better than using natural rubber. In addition to reducing raw material consumption for export to other countries, this can help to safeguard the country's reserves so that they can be used in the long run. As a result, raw material scarcity can be avoided. Next, the solution to the second problem, which is that the services sector is impacted, resulting in a trade deficit, is that the employer should diversify their services for the home market, generating a wide range of commodities rather than focusing on generating specific services to provide their staff with the opportunity. This is to keep the community's purchasing power and prevent the country's unemployment rate from increasing. A trade deficit reduces the incomes of domestic workers, pushing many into lower income brackets. Families with lower incomes find it far more difficult to save, nor even shop for their daily necessities. Therefore, increasing trade deficit can and do reduce national savings in addition to help the community to sustain their lives. Therefore, the government and private sector must work together to help the sectors affected by this COVID-19 pandemic by helping them diversify their service and creating a wide range of services to offer. For example, in June 2020, AirAsia laid off over 300 employees to cut costs during the pandemic. The same month, it launched an agriculture e-commerce platform called Outfarm, where F&B business can buy fresh produce in bulk straight from its network of farmers. Based on CEO Lalita, all 8 our farm staff were existing internal staff and the new staff were ex-AirAsia crew who had just been laid off. This shows how AirAsia managed to help their employees by diversifying their services to help decreasing the trade deficit in services, especially for the travel sector. Diversify the economy is important to prevent the country from depending on one sector only. Therefore, this is the best solution to solve the problem of trade deficit in services that can be taken into account for use at this time.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nur Shazwana bin Talasha. My metric number 2019288208. So, the conclusion we get is international trade is extremely beneficial and necessary for the continuation of globalization. Without it, nations will be limited to the goods and services produced within their own borders. The economic basis for trade is that nations have different resources, which cause some nations to gain an absolute advantage, which means a country can produce more of a specific product from a specific quantity of resources than other countries. Comparative advantage assist the country in moving closer to allocative and productive efficiency. However, it should be noted that some countries, on the other hand, have comparative advantage, which means that a country can produce a specific product at a lower opportunity cost than other countries. And opportunity cost plays a significant role in international trade. Nations differ in their endowment of economic resources, and not all developed or underdeveloped countries have the same technology to produce needed product in an efficient and variable cost manner. To summarize, international trade leads to economic growth if policy measures and economic infrastructure are accommodating enough to deal with the changes in the social and financial scenario that result from it. Furthermore, a well-functioning national competition regime is insufficient to meet cross-border competition challenges. Moreover, international trade provides opportunities for developing countries by increasing their capacity to produce and acquire goods. However, it should be controlled in order to avoid the closure of some local businesses. That's all from me. Thank you.